Good afternoon and welcome to the third in our series of 5 live webcasts. Today we're going to be looking at appointing and managing agents and distributors. I'm Ian Forsyth and with me as ever, Ewan. We started off saying you had 16 years experience. It must feel more like 17 or 18 by now.
Just about.
But we'll come back to that in a minute and just and see how you are feeling about it. As I said, appointing and managing agents and distributors, a key part of exporting for a lot of companies, tapping into local market knowledge. But one of the things you have to be very careful about is making sure that you've got the right agreements and pieces of paper in place beforehand, because it's fine if it's all working. When things take a turn for the worse, are you properly covered? Do you both understand exactly what the expectations are? Those are just some of the things that we'll be exploring with you in over the next 45 minutes. But first, if you're new to these webcasts, just a quick reminder that we really want your questions as well. Yes, we've got some pre-recorded content and I'm going to be asking you about some questions to expand on that, but we really want your questions too. So you'll see on the right-hand side of the video window that we are sitting in at the moment, there's a discussion box. All you have to do is type in your question and hit enter, and it will come through to us here. Now, as I said, we do have some pre-recorded content that we're going to run through over the next 20 to 30 minutes. But as soon as that's finished, any questions that we've got from you, we'll start feeding those through to you. And so get in there quick. It is a first come, first served. Make sure you get your questions in early, and we'll do our best to get through as many, if not all of them, as we possibly can. But first, Ewan, I think every week I've always kind of started with almost the kind of negative side of things, but it's about identifying the pitfalls, because I think that's an important thing in terms of setting the context. So in terms of appointing agents or distributors and then building a relationship with them, in your experience, what are the sort of pitfalls that people come upon?
Well, I think it's understanding that choosing the right distribution strategy can either make or break your opportunity into a new international market. If you choose the right strategy, whether it's through agents, choosing the right agents, or down the distribution line, and if you get that right, then your business can take off in a particular market. If you get it wrong, it can kill the opportunity stone dead. So it's one that a number of companies really don't look at in sufficient detail. A lot of companies think that they will go to trade shows and they'll pick up agents there, and that they're not really risking anything by signing up a deal with an agent, and they've got nothing to lose. That couldn't be further from the truth. And that's something that we try and work with companies at a really an early stage to understand both what them and the agent or distributor are trying to get out of the working relationship.
Right, so it's about making sure you get it set up from day one.
Very much so.
We'll be going into this in a bit more detail, but we're obviously talking about agents and distributors.
Yeah.
Just in very brief terms, what's the difference?
There are lots of different types of agents and distributors, but very broadly, an agent will work on your behalf to source customers and clients, and they will get paid a commission, whereas a distributor will purchase product from you at a discounted price, and then they will go out and find customers within a geographic market. So the distributor becomes your customer. With the agent is going out there to find all of your customers on your behalf.
Okay, so quite different,
Yeah.
but a similar role in many ways, but we'll go into that in more detail as things progress. Now, I did say that we've got a number of pre-recorded elements, just to give you a little bit of a feel for some of the key aspects in relation to this particular topic. And in this first one, we'll hear a little bit about the factors involved in actually deciding whether or not going for an agent is the right thing for your business. So let's take a quick look at that particular area.
For companies involved in international trade, it is likely that they will be required to use the services of intermediaries to access markets. The role of intermediaries in international trade is extremely important, and as such, the selection of a good, reputable intermediary is of substantial benefit. Many factors should be considered when considering whether to sell direct into a market or not. If you choose to use an intermediary, great care should be taken to consider the most appropriate type of intermediary, as choosing the wrong type or the wrong person can be disastrous for your export opportunities. In general terms, intermediaries in the sales activities of a company will take the role of an agent or a distributor. However, there are variations on the role which may extend the involvement which the agent or distributor could undertake. If you have never used the services of an intermediary, it is always a good start to talk to other exporters who have had experience of using similar third parties in the specific markets which you are looking to sell into. There is nothing better than hearing firsthand from other exporters some of the pros and cons of such arrangements and the issues to look out for and bear in mind when making your assessment. Making the most of the Global Chamber of Commerce network, as well as utilising global networks such as Scottish Development International, UK Trade and Investment and associated services such as Global Scots, are an extremely effective way to gain market intelligence on third-party intermediaries, all of which can help you with your decision-making.
So we heard there that using agents is quite a commonplace approach for many people who are trading overseas, but like anything, there's always sort of pros and cons. What are the main pros and cons in relation to using an agent?
In terms of the pros, first of all, using an agent allows you to control the pricing because by nature of the agreement, the agent is selling on your behalf and then taking a commission. So that enables you to work with the agent and effectively set the pricing. Mm-hmm. That can be a very good thing from your own perspective. Another benefit is it enables companies to move into some overseas markets that they may well otherwise not be able to move into. So maybe money is a scarce resource, mm-hmm. and you want to move into a marketplace that you've done some desk research, but you've never been in that country. You maybe don't have a huge range of contacts and connections within that region. Using an agent and a well-resourced and a well-connected agent is a fairly cost-effective way of enabling you to get into that marketplace and push your products and start generating some sales. Mm-hmm. In terms of the downsides, there are always some downsides. You have to pay a commission, so mm-hmm. you need to bear that in mind when you're looking at your pricing. You've obviously got the sales price that you're selling on to the end customer, but the agent wants some commission for that. You may have to prepare some marketing materials and collateral to provide the agent, so that's also another cost. Choosing the agent, though, really is the biggest pitfall, and also managing that agent. I think a number of issues that I see are companies that they don't effectively choose the correct agents in the first place. Yeah. But once they have agents on board, then people sometimes forget that it's an ongoing process and the agents need to be managed proactively, because the more you look after and manage and work with your agents, then the better chance you have of both of you being successful. Okay.
Now you mentioned commission there.
Yeah.
Is that something that varies hugely, or is there a kind of parameter that you would expect around the commission?
It's very difficult to give a concise figure. Okay. Partly because there are a range of different types of agents. So you may have an agent, a mercantile agent, for example, that is an overseas agent that actually holds stock on your behalf and then sells that stock as they go along. Another type of agent is a del creder agent, mm-hmm. and that type of agent will indemnify the principal on any third-party losses from customers in that region. So a del creder agent, because they are taking on a higher risk, would expect a higher commission from you. So it could really be anything from, say, 5% up to 25%. Another factor to take into account is your margins that you're working on with your product, whether it's a high volume, low margin product or vice versa. That's another element that you have to take into account, and that can help you determine whether you go down the agent route or indeed whether you may want to go down the distribution route instead.
Okay. One of the things that was mentioned in the film was the idea that it's worthwhile talking to other companies who use agents or some of the support agencies out there. I would assume that would be one way of getting a bit of a handle on what to expect for your particular product or sector. But what other things would you recommend businesses to find out from other companies or support agencies?
I think you can't beat talking to people that are in a marketplace and that are using agents. If you're in the food and drink sector, for example, and you're exporting to North America, then you want to understand and speak to agents that are already selling successfully into these markets, whether into the specific subsector of food and drink or whether into a geographical part of North America. Talk to them, try and get some references from different support organisations. If you go to Highlands and Islands Enterprise, their international trade team have got a technical inquiry help desk, for example. Speak to them and they can signpost you appropriately. Enterprise Europe, one of our other partners, they have an excellent service that enables you to matchmake. And if you're very clear about the type of agent that you're looking for, in terms of the location, in terms of the products, in terms of what you want them to do for you, then Enterprise Europe can help you source and locate some agents within the European Union.
Okay, I believe we've got a web address for that that's going to come up later on.
We do,
We'll make sure that that's in the discussion box at the end for people. Okay, so we're going to move on. In this second film, we're going to look at the importance of making sure that you have an agreement in place at the outset. Like any other business relationship, it's great when things are going well, but you really need to make sure that both parties are clear about what to expect from the relationship. So in the second film, we're going to look at agreements.
An agent is defined as a person who has authority from the principal to represent them and or act on their behalf and legally bind the principal in relations with third parties. In return, for developing or obtaining business on behalf of his client, the agent would normally expect to be remunerated on the basis of commission relative to the value of sales achieved through their efforts, calculated on X works pricing. To avoid any disputes, it is vital that the principal and agent draw up and agree a contract commonly known as an agency agreement, detailing the expectations and obligations of parties to the agreement. As a legally binding document, in drawing up the agreement, the parties should be aware and take into account any relevant laws in their respective countries relative to agency agreements. The agreement should clearly define the extent of the agent's authority, be this actual or implied, as this could impact on other provisions in the agreement. Other issues, such as details of the products and territories to be covered by the agreement and the provision of information and support to be given by the principal, must be specified, as this may impact on the agent's performance. There are different types of agents who may be involved in international trade, dependent on the role which both parties to the agreement require the agent to perform. Agents may be identified under different names, dependent on the role which they are required to fulfill. For example, commission agents, del credere, or mercantile agents. As the agent is in effect representing the principal in the overseas market, the principal must use all due diligence to ensure that any agent appointed by him will act in his full interests and not undertake any activity which may jeopardize the principal's standing in the overseas market.
So as we heard in the film there, it's clearly important that your relationship with your agent is clearly defined. But one of the aspects about that is deciding what kind of level of authority your agent has on your behalf. How do you go about making that kind of decision? What are the factors that play with that?
I think the starting point, like so many things in international trade, is to understand what you want to do from your own business perspective. It's the old adage, you want to make the contracts and the agreements that you want to make as opposed to ones that are forced upon you. So trying to understand the bigger picture, trying to understand how the agent is going to take your product into the marketplace. So when I go to trade shows working on behalf of clients, I often get approached by agents and they tell me how they can look after the products that I'm trying to promote, and they tell me how fantastic they're going to be. I would immediately turn that around and ask them for their sales and marketing plan as to how they're going to promote my products. Because if you're taking a new product into a market by using an agent, it has to be a win-win situation for both of you. So lots of companies tend to not ask the questions and not push it back to the agents to find out what do they have that's of use to them. So do they have a contact list? Do they have existing relationships within that particular sector, both geographically and strategically? So what is unique about them as an agent to help you? And once you start to develop that relationship and understanding, you can then have a bit of a picture as to the levels of authority that you want to provide that agent. And you may want to give them fairly limited levels of authority to start with if you've just been introduced to the agent and you're starting to understand how things work between the two of you. And as your relationship works and develops over a period of time, then you may want to increase that level of authority.
Okay. You mentioned there asking a potential agent about their sales and marketing plan. What kinds of things would you be looking for them to be able to say in relation to that?
I'd want to first of all understand, really start to test them so that they understand what my product is and where it should be positioned in the marketplace. So first of all, I'm trying to understand their deep understanding and knowledge of my customer marketplace. You quite often find that a good agent will really help you shape and understand what your target market is in a particular country. So if you've never exported to North America before, you may have a fantastic product or a product range and you may think that your target market is in a particular area. A good agent will help you shape and provide some input to that, and that will be using their knowledge and experience of many years. Don't be afraid to take up references. Speak to other customers that they're acting on behalf of. And it's also a useful approach to find out whether they are already operating maybe on behalf of some of your competitors. That happens a lot, and you'll get agents that will approach you to say that they'll look after your product in a particular territory when they may already be acting on behalf of your direct competitors, and they may not really have an impetus or a particular reason to push your product over the one that they're already selling.
Right. So it sounds from the way you're talking that a good agent will have a good balance of local market knowledge and an ability to sell into that market. Is that a kind of 50-50 split you're looking for, or is one more important than the other? How does that
I think they're both equally important. The other thing that an agent has to have for a successful relationship is they have to have a sufficient incentive. And it needs to be a win-win. So if the incentive is nominal or not sufficient enough for the agent, then that's going to limit the opportunities that they're going to promote your product. Now, incentive isn't just about the percentage on commission. It may be about how you develop the relationship with the agent and if the agent sees the bigger picture. So, for example, you may be bringing one product into a marketplace to start with, but if the agent understands that if this product starts to sell and become successful, then there may be an opportunity to take a second and a third and a fourth product into that marketplace, and the agent will get the opportunity to sell and promote that on your behalf. Then that can be a bit of a shared incentive. And if an agent is looking after maybe 10 or 15 different clients and ranges of products, the more incentive you give them, the chances are your product range will sit higher up on their priority list when they're out there making sales calls.
Right. So it's back to what you said earlier about creating a win-win relationship between both parties, essentially.
Very much so.
Yeah. Okay. We've focused so far on agents, and since we talked at the very outset about agents and distributors, it's time that we put the balance right which is exactly what we're going to do in this next film when we look at distributors, slightly different from agents. So let's hear a little bit about what distributors can do for you.
Companies wishing to expand their international trade activities often find it necessary to develop a well-planned market strategy, which could include using distributors in some markets. Distributors are often able to use their business acumen in situations which would be problematic for agents or companies seeking direct entry into the chosen market. Unlike agents, distributors will purchase products from the principal and develop their own strategies to sell these goods at a profit to them in the selected territory. The distributor is a stockist protected by territorial agreements. In distribution agreements, the distributor would often expect to be granted sole or exclusive rights of representation for the designated goods in the selected territory. The nature of the agreement must also be clearly specified. Under both sole and exclusive agreements, the principal is not entitled to appoint another distributor within the distributor's territory. The distribution agreement is not a contract of sale for specified goods. Generally, it establishes the terms on which contracts of sale for specific goods will be concluded. The distribution agreement and contract of sale are two distinct legal undertakings. Although often identified as such, the distributor is not an agent of the principal in the legal sense and does not act on behalf of the principal, nor is he accountable to him for profits on the sale of products within the specified territory. As with any form of agreement which may have legal implications, distribution agreements require careful drafting. As with agency agreements, distribution agreements should be handled carefully and comprehensive assessment made before entering into any such agreement. The appointment of the wrong distributor can have severe impact on the activities of the principal in the chosen market.
So we heard there that a distributor essentially buys your product from you and then sells it on, and in many ways that sounds like a really appealing relationship because you're more or less guaranteed a sale. But is it really that simple?
Yes and no. Again, it comes down to choosing the right distributor. If you choose the wrong distributor, then your opportunity in that market is finished completely. Because the distributor becomes effectively your customer in that marketplace, then even more importance is placed on choosing the right one. Also, because you are not protecting the pricing strategy in a way, you're selling the product at a discounted price to the distributor. That does two things. That reduces your margin, and in some ways you need to balance that off by having a guaranteed sale. But it also means that you have limited control potentially over the final sale to the customer in that particular region, because that choice is down to the distributor. Now, you will build in lots of rules and regulations surrounding that into the distribution agreement. Depending on how you sell your products, if you sell your products online, for example, on a global basis, then you need to be very careful that you're not indirectly competing with your own distributor by selling onto the web. So you need to take that into consideration at the beginning when you're looking at mapping out your distribution agreement.
Okay. You used the words choosing the wrong distributor and basically implied that could be catastrophic. What does in your experience, what does the wrong distributor look like? What are the characteristics to look out for?
Some basic elements. They don't understand the market as well as you would like them. There is a grey area between your expectations and their expectations in terms of how they're going to take that product into the marketplace. They may already be working with your competitors. The incentives might not be there. So it isn't really one thing. It's a combination of factors, and really try and understand as much background due diligence as you can. Using the Highlands and Islands Enterprise International team, they can access the Scottish Development International offices overseas, UKTI, the global chamber network as well. That can all be accessed via High, and that enables you really to get into a particular marketplace. They can do background checks, they can do reference checks on distributors, and just try and find out as much as you can, but it all comes down to a shared understanding of expectations. So being very, very clear that what you expect and understand the agreement is going to do is precisely the same as what your distributor also understands is going to happen.
Okay, just a wee kind of technical point, I suppose, from the film, where Tanya mentioned that the distribution agreement and the contract of sale are two separate things. Can you illuminate that a little bit for us?
Yeah, the distribution agreement really sets out the overall working relationship between you, the principal, and the distributor, and it sets out the terms and conditions by which a contract of sale would take place. So, for example, in your distribution agreement, you may have a minimum volume that the distributor is required to purchase from you in any 12-month period. So if you said that the distributor had to purchase a minimum of 1,000 units of your product in a 12-month period, that would be set out in the distribution agreement. If the distributor came to you and purchased 250 of them, you would build that into a contract of sale, and all of the terms and conditions would be set out in that. So they are very different, although one links into the other.
And clearly important that you understand both of them.
Yeah.
Okay, our penultimate film this time round, we're going to look at distribution strategy, because that's a key part of the whole exporting scenario, and particularly in relation to agents and distributors. So let's hear from Tanya about the distribution strategy and where that fits in.
Exporting can open up new opportunities, fuel growth, and dramatically boost your turnover and profit. Selling your goods and services abroad can massively increase your customer base and your profits. But successful exporting relies on understanding where good sales opportunities lie and how best to take advantage of them. A good distribution strategy will identify the best sales channels for your firm and tell you how to exploit them. Your choice of distribution channel will also be influenced by what you want it to do. You might need a channel that showcases your product, for instance, or provides installation and customer support. If you want to build relationships with end users, you'll need a sales channel that gives you direct control. The right distribution strategy will fuel your business growth. Working with sales agents and companies with established customers, for example, is an excellent way to expand into new markets where the cost would otherwise limit your ability to reach customers. The degree of control you want to retain is important too. By working with a sales agent, you can control your pricing and perhaps establish a direct relationship with the customer. If branding matters to you, work closely with a small number of distributors rather than selling through too many intermediaries. The same selective approach applies if you need to invest in your distribution channels. By giving sales agents product training, for example. A strategic approach to distribution will also identify conflicts and minimize them. Therefore, if you sell your product directly online and through other offline retailers, you will find yourself in competition with your own distributors. How do you decide how much support to offer distributors and how much to invest in promoting your online sales channel? Whatever channels you use, you need to manage them properly. This means investing in in-house systems and staff, as well as building good working relationships with agents and distributors. Efficient logistics and effective communication are vital if you want to maximize your sales.
So we heard there about the factors that should influence your distribution strategy. In your experience, what are the things you need to nail down around that strategy?
I think if you come back to basics, understanding your supply chain to begin with is very important, because that enables you to really understand whether you should be going down an agent or a distribution route. Different things are important to different companies depending on what they're selling into what markets. So it may be that it isn't just a sales process that you're looking to happen. You may also have after sales, you may have repairs, you may want somebody to stock repairs and spare parts of your product depending on what you're selling. And who you want to deliver these different aspects of the sales and after sales service can really help determine whether it should be a distributor or an agent. Also understanding what interaction you already have within that marketplace. So if you're selling online, you need to be very clear whether there is a conflict in terms of selling directly online against distribution, against agent. What rights and exclusivities are you going to give, if anything, to the distributor or the agent? And does that affect any orders that come via the online website as well? So it's really starting to look at the bigger picture. And I think also understanding that one route might be appropriate at a particular time. So when you enter a marketplace, you have limited capacity in terms of time, resources and money, possibly. So you may choose to go down one particular route because that fits in with your ability to enter that market at that time. It's a moving feast and things develop, and a lot of companies will dip their toe into the water, possibly by using an agent because it's possibly slightly less risky and costs a bit less money to get into a marketplace. But it may be, depending on their product, 6 months down the line, 12 months down the line, if it fits into their overall supply chain, that they might want to move to a distribution model.
Okay. I think you've actually covered the next question I was going to ask you about that film. And since we're running out of time and we've got a few questions beginning to stack up, I think what we'll do is we'll actually move to the last film, which looks at EU directives and laws, which of course we all love dearly. As we'll hear, there are a lot of myths around some of these laws. So let's see if the film can actually dispel some of those myths for us.
When you take a step back and consider all of the issues surrounding your choice to appoint an agent or a distributor, you must take the time to evaluate the impact, if appropriate, of legislation such as the EU Agents Directive and EU competition law. There are lots of myths and misunderstandings in relation to agency law, and also regarding uniformity across the EU in relation to these agreements, so an understanding of these issues is very important. We would always recommend that you get an international trade lawyer to look over any agency or distribution agreements, as basic mistakes can be made at the outset with costly implications further down the line. One aspect of choosing an appropriate agent or distributor for the early stage exporter is the lack of due diligence which the principal carries out when assessing the appropriateness of the intermediary to be chosen. This is surprising given the importance of such an appointment, but often the first-time exporter gets carried away with perceived interest in their product and forgets to ask the most basic of questions. As with most aspects of business, personal recommendations and relationships can make or break an agent or distributor relationship as well as trust. Take the time to develop your relationship with your potential intermediary, understand expectations from both sides, and don't be afraid to ask to talk to existing clients to gauge how the agent or distributor operates in reality on the ground. Remember, once you have signed an agreement with an intermediary, that is not the end of things. Far from it. Successful intermediary relationships thrive on communication, shared incentives and trust, as well as ongoing market and product analysis to ensure that you can both keep ahead of the competition.
So you in the EU tends to be one of these subjects that's surrounded in mystery, and there's all sorts of myths out there. What are the things that people need to take with a pinch of salt in relation to EU directives and exporting and agents and distributors?
I think one very basic thing that everyone should bear in mind in relation to agents and distributors is just because you operate within the EU, legislation isn't uniform right the way across all of the EU states. So some of the implications of signing an agency agreement or a distribution agreement with individuals possibly in France or Belgium or Germany may have a very different impact than if you were to sign with an Italian distributor or an Italian agent. So don't be fooled by thinking just because everybody's based in the EU that it's just one rule and one regulation. A lot of issues arise as a result of people maybe not appreciating that.
Right, that comes as a surprise to me, I have to say, because I would have thought that, you know, the whole EU thing is about ease of trade and so on, but something to be wary of.
Yeah.
The other thing that the film mentioned there was using international trade lawyers. Now, I can imagine, because when I saw those words put together, I saw huge bills and all sorts of expense. I can see the sense of it, but how do you make sure you're getting best value from that kind of relationship?
I think it's trying to understand the contract or the agreement that you want the international trade lawyer to put into place for you. There is a great difference between going to an international trade lawyer to say, here is an idea of a distribution agreement. I've not thought through all the different aspects, but can you help us put it together? Because you're starting off on a fairly generic inquiry and there'll be significant amount of work needs to be put into that. If you can thrash out an agreement in all but legal speak with your potential distributor, get it as detailed as possible and then take it to the international trade lawyer, and the only thing you're asking them to do is to turn it into a legal document that takes into account specific issues, then that can save a significant amount of time and it can save a significant amount of money as well.
Right, okay, so it's about knowing what you want essentially.
It is, and it's all coming back to try and enter into the agreements that you want as a business as opposed to ones that are getting forced or foisted upon you.
Right, which has been a kind of recurring theme through the whole discussion, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Well, I think it's time to take a look at some of the questions we've had from the audience. The first one we've got from Andrew, which is brilliant. It's one of the best questions we've ever had. Is it easier to get a divorce in the EU than to get rid of a poor agent? He's even put a little smiley face beside it. Fantastic. So, divorce or getting rid of a poor agent, which is easiest?
Divorce.
You reckon?
Yeah. Again, it comes back to some countries within Europe have very, very challenging and draconian rules and regulations in terms of agency agreements. And it is not uncommon for companies who've signed an agreement with an agent, say in France or Belgium or Germany, for example, you may have a situation where the agent has actually not sold anything on your behalf. They've been in place for 1, 2, 3 years, and you want to terminate that agreement with the agent, and you may think there's no issue there, they've not sold anything on behalf of us anyway. But if it's not been structured properly or you've not looked at things in the right way at the very beginning, you may potentially have to pay out compensation. And that really comes back to one of the key issues when companies go to trade shows. There is a bit of a perception out there that you can't do any harm. If an agent wants to represent you, what could the worst thing happen? They might not sell any of my product. It may be a lot worse than that, and you may be effectively taking on board some contingent liabilities. So definitely go for the divorce and don't try and go down the route of exiting a relationship with an agent without clearly thinking it through. Okay.
We'll not bother doing an extra webcast on divorce, though. I think that's probably one we're best to steer clear of.
Indeed.
The second question we have here is from Nigel, and it's quite a straightforward question, but I suspect the answer might not be as straightforward. Where can we get sample agency agreements?
Through the High Technical Help Desk, we can provide sample agreements for specific jurisdictions. because one of the key issues that you will want to put in place is to understand under what legal jurisdiction you would want the distribution agreement in play. There are templates, there are samples that we can provide through the Inquiry Help Desk or indeed through UKTI or SDI in particular markets. I would be wary of these sample agreements again to a certain degree, and some of the issues that I see are companies that take a sample agreement off the web, they then input it in without getting any additional advice and input to that agreement, because a sample agreement is what it says. It's very, very broad and very generic, and you need to make sure that it focuses into your products and it enables you to do what you want to do by linking into an agent or a distributor.
Okay, so a kind of mix of being fairly straightforward but also a bit of caution essentially.
Yeah, definitely.
Right. We've got time for just one more question, even though we're getting quite close to the end. George has said that he's considering the use of a master distributor for medical products into the Middle East. Is this a good idea? He then adds, the master would sell on to other distributors.
Could well be an excellent idea, and it could help get you traction into one particular market or a range of markets, especially in the Middle East. Some key questions that I would be wanting to understand is I'd want to understand as much background, not only about the master distributor, but about who are the other sub-distributors that they would be selling into. I'd want to do my own due diligence on that, not just take the word of the master distributor, and really try and understand whether these distributors have different working relationships in place already, and just really carry out some fairly thorough due diligence, and to make sure that again the expectations of all of these distributors are linked in neatly to that of your and the master distributor's way of going forward.
Okay, I said that was the last one, but really, really briefly, there's another one here just to squeeze in. It's just, I think it's building on the getting rid of the poor agent. And it's from Nigel again. Surely you can put termination clauses into any agreement so that you retain control in situations where agents fail to deliver. I suppose with our kind of divorce thing earlier on, that's the equivalent of a prenuptial agreement of some sort.
You can, but again, certain jurisdictions within Europe are very, very draconian, and especially in terms of agency law, that will link into parts of employment law within some of these countries. So these are the kind of things that you really should be running past an international trade lawyer, because if you don't get the agreement set up properly at the outset, that's where you tend to open yourself up to challenges further down the line. But if you set it up properly to start with, the termination clauses, such as has been asked in the question, can be covered off quite neatly. Unfortunately, I tend to get the situations with companies who try and come to me to resolve a problem. They haven't dealt with it at the outset, therefore the agreement's maybe been structured in a way that opens them up to potential liability. Okay.
Well, we really have kind of run out of time this time round, and normally at this stage I'd come to you and say, tell us a bit more about what we're doing in the next webcast, but you've got to duck out this time, because next time round it's Carol Harvey from UK Export Finance who will be with us, and she'll be talking about a range of finance topics which include trade finance and credit insurance. But critically, Carol will also be talking about the support that UK Export Finance can offer to you as well, and what they're able to do for you. So as ever, if you haven't booked for the next webcast, it will be on Wednesday the 25th of March at the same time. It's at 12 o'clock. As ever, there is a link below the window that we are sitting in just now. You can click on that, and that will take you through to a range of information, including a link to the booking page. So make sure you get your booking in now if you haven't already. That's on the 25th of March. However, Ewan's not completely off the hook, because you'll be back with us, I think, on the 31st. And that time around we'll be looking at export documentation. So that's the 31st of March, 12 o'clock again. And again, with that one, you can book online using the link below us. One final thing today, just before we do go, is there's a survey at the very bottom of the page underneath the video window, a link to a survey. Highlands and Islands Enterprise are really keen to get your feedback and your input, suggestions, ideas, and how you feel these sessions have been going for you and how useful they've been. So if you could just take a couple of minutes when we go off air, don't log off straight away, head in there and just complete that survey. It's very short. I think there's about 6 or 7 questions. If you go in there and complete that survey, we would really appreciate that. That would be hugely helpful for us. So it just remains for me to say thank you very much again for joining us. Thanks to Ewan for his expertise once again. And we hope to see you on the 25th of March. That's Wednesday the 25th of March at 12 p.m. when we'll have Carol Harvey from UK Export Finance with us.